Welcome, everybody, to the Mainstream Indie Music channel. We talk about everything indie music, and today is going to be a little different. We're going to be doing a bit of a history lesson into indie music. But if you have not seen this channel before, I welcome you. We do talk about all indie type music. And to the 294 subscribers, I definitely welcome you to returning to watch this week's episode. Now, of course, for those who have been following my channel for about the year or so it's been active, you probably have noticed, I'd say over 90% of our attention has been focused on indie music, especially since the early 2000s kind of moving forward. This is going to be one of the first episodes where we take a look, as I mentioned, into the history of indie music, one of the pioneers of indie music. Now, it's no question, one kind of thing to keep in mind when I talk about this is the time period of the Talking Heads and when they started to gain popularity. A lot of times back then in the 70s and into the 80s, people were looking for new music because of disco starting to dwindle and kind of release its stronghold that it had on the music industry for its reigning years. And what happened was that music itself shifted, especially amongst rock, to, you could say, dance or pop rock. And what that means is rock music started to change the way that it produced its sound, in that it started to use dance beats and kind of dance rhythm guitar riffs to kind of show rock and roll in a different light. You know, so far up to that moment of time, you had the 60s with the British invasion, the 70s and 80s kind of started to bear way into the arena style rock. If anything, you could kind of see Queen as being one of the first bands that kind of started to bring that dance pop music into the mainstream. And psychedelic rock also had been starting to, its own upheaval. So you had such a mixing and melting pot at that time that a lot of those bands were twisting all of those things together. And that's why I kind of see them as the indie music of that time, where to me, that's what indie music has always been, is music that tries to not fit into one mold, where the whole point of it is that the artist in indie music can be free to experiment and use whatever sound that they want to get their message across. And the Talking Heads back then could be, of course, led by David Byrne, could be seen as one of the bands that took advantage of that, and where they did not want to be held to one style or era of music. And David Byrne himself is really witness of that. And growing up, his family had come over from overseas in Europe and had come to the United States. And what's kind of interesting is he describes himself as being autistic. I don't think he's ever officially, tested himself or got any real medical examination, but he says that he has autistic tendencies. And when he was growing up as a child, music was his best way to communicate himself and what he was feeling. He got into music. He could play so many different instruments by the time he was a teenager. And right away, he went to the Rhode Island School of Design. He didn't. His bandmates did. He was guitar and vocals, where he met Chris France, who played the drums. And they were called the Artistics. And France's girlfriend, Tina Weymouth, hope I said that right, provided transportation. But the three of them moved to New York City, living together. And she decided to become their bass player because they were having a hard time finding a bass player. And so really that's how the early form of the Talking Heads was put together. The name is really almost how it sounds, where, back then especially, all news came from a talking head, or a political figure can be seen as a talking head. And that's why they wanted to use that as their band name. They did release an album together, their first one called Talking Heads 77. And it charted because if you don't know the history of the band, Psycho Killer is right off that album. So right off the bat, they gained notoriety and popularity. But what really helped take them off was Brian Eno, seeing the success of their first album, really wanted to work with them together. And what's interesting is I can imagine David Byrne has such artistic vision, and working together with Brian definitely brought them benefits. But honestly, as much as I credit Brian Eno, I really think David Byrne would have found his vision as a band with or without him. Like, let's be real here. Brian Eno is a legend in his own right, but David Byrne clearly had a vision for the band. And it just so happened that they decided to work together very well. But they had such a diverse range, like I mentioned before, of musical directions. You had psychedelic rock, you had psychedelic funk, you had African tribal music, especially think of the song Once in a Lifetime, you know, how they kind of merged that together. We're going to get to the music video here in a second, but they had funkadelic, which, you know, was becoming a huge thing back then. You had basic rock and pop music mixed together as well. And one of their first hits, other than Psycho Killer, was a cover of Al Green's song Take Me to the River, which really, you know, launched their careers even more so forward. Fear of Music was released in 1979. A lot more pop, post-punk rock was used in that. Funkadelia was used in that. You kind of think of the late 70s. You know, psychedelic music was just absolutely huge back then. You had their hit song Life During Wartime, which of course David Byrne's catchphrase, "This ain't no party, this ain't no disco," became hugely popular. Remain in Light was released in 1980, and that's when they really started to change their sound, because they brought on a new band member who was from Nigeria, who was just really, he is regarded as the king of Afrobeat. So, you know, Eno really said this is a guy for them to check out. And they included, you know, different, you know, North African music, disco funk. They would like to talk a lot in their songs as well. David Byrne just loved the music around the world. You know, he was not content with just one style of music. Even him personally, he wanted to try and listen to different types of music all over the world. Now, of course, was there pros to that? Was there cons to that? Yes, were some of the other members of the Talking Heads not really into all those different types of musical styles? Probably, but I do think that they were okay with playing along, and they probably did have some interest in it, because they did go a long time as a group. In fact, what's interesting is they had just made 4 albums in barely 4 years together. So they went on a really long hiatus. They went almost, I think, 3 years between albums. They did release a live album called The Name of the Band is This Band is Talking Heads. But then Brian Eno parted ways with them. And of course, he went on to play with U2 and produce U2's music. Now, was that to the Talking Heads' benefit? Again, I'll let you be the judge, because in 1983, they released Speaking in Tongues, which had Burning Down the House on it, heavy rotation, especially on MTV. Once again, just like Once in a Lifetime, the music video really captured people's attention. But the sad truth of the matter is, the tour to support that album was their last tour that they did together. They did release new music together, though, but they just never ended up touring together. They released 3 albums after that, and then by the end of 1991, the Talking Heads announced that they had disbanded. once again, you look at David Byrne, again, how he communicates with people, maybe had finally caught up with them. A lot of the old bandmates of the Talking Heads said that they did not want to break up the group, that David himself had broken up the group. Who knows? We don't really truly know what's happened in a band. What's really interesting is they have gotten together as a group to support major events. Like they had the 15-year re-release of some of their albums. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where they were joined on stage together. But they have never toured and played music as a complete band together. In fact, a lot of the old group says that there's still a lot of bad blood amongst the group together. So in 2023, their album Stop Making Sense their film rather, was re-released in IMAX, which was their 40th anniversary of that album. They did get together as a group, kind of like a cool Q&A session, but what's really kind of sad and interesting is supposedly in early this year of January 2024, it is reported that the Talking Heads turned down an $80 million offer for a reunion tour, including a performance at Coachella. So obviously, there's a lot of bad blood there, that they just really don't get along, and that's just kind of the sad truth. David Byrne has done so much himself. He has done TED Talks. He has performed, especially with John Mulaney, if you'd seen the both of them together in multiple projects. He has performed on, tons of talk shows, tons of TV circuits, whether it was with the Talking Heads or whether it was just by he himself. And he continues to tour and promote his own music and the Talking Heads with his own band as well. And it's really cool. If you haven't seen his recent band, so many of them wear like wireless headsets, and part of the performance is like kind of like body dancing art. It's so cool. And you could just see, he's one of those people where you could just tell he is a musical genius. He is. Now, is that to his own detriment with maybe getting along with other band members? Hey, the proof is what happened with the Talking Heads as a group, but no one can really doubt that they did not leave their mark on the music scene, especially with making the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when, their last performance as a group together was in 1991. So that's what we have on David Byrne and the Talking Heads. Time will tell. Maybe one day they will perform together again as a group. But until then, this is the Indie Music Channel, mainstream indie music channel, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye.